Hi and welcome back to my channel, where today I guess I'm going to attempt to convey my origin story. That is as mental as it sounds. I suppose it would have to be pretty mental to create mental. Big question, isn't it? How do personality disorders form? Now, I have histrionic personality disorder and narcissistic personality disorder, and the crossover between them is very much on the grandiose side. As to which came first, it seems to be a bit of a chicken and the egg. Could I be histrionic without the grandiose narcissism? Would I have the grandiose narcissism without the histrionic personality disorder? I don't have the answers for that. Hopefully one day with therapy, but this is where I am in therapy just now. And maybe this is as far as the answer will get. So without further ado, I'm going to tell you how I became a grandiose narcissist. Yeah, okay. We're going down that rabbit hole to narcissistic wonderland. Which I am. That phrase is very much growing on me. It should be, actually. Because that's kind of the basis of, I suppose, my whole sense of grandiosity. Now, generally, there's kind of two routes you can go with NPD. Kind of abuse or spoiled. I'm spoiled, but not in the way you would think. To a far greater extent than that. I was literally being behaviourally trained to be created in someone else's image. And no, I'm not talking about God. Did I mention my grandfather was a narcissist? So I don't have an answer to the nature or nurture debate with personality disorders. I don't know if it's hereditary, if it was there but it was trained. But what I do know is my grandiosity was very much given to me by my grandfather. He played a big hand in raising me, and I suppose he was trying to make me into his legacy. Because he was a narcissist. And so that will explain where the personality disorders come from, but I do think the grandiosity allowed it, or was created by them, and or maybe it was there to begin with and just enhanced. Anyway, I will do my best to attempt to explain a formation of my own insanity. It's really super fucking crazy and trippy when that is actually what is going on in your life. Welcome to being diagnosed with a personality disorder. Two, in my case. And finding out how they were formed. Now, when I first got my diagnosis, started therapy, there's all these questions about your childhood, and I didn't have an abusive childhood. I had quite the opposite. And that's where the grandiosity comes in. Because I don't have the traits of the vulnerable traits of narcissism. I meet all the criteria for HPD, which is my primary diagnosis, but I have the NPD crossover because I meet enough of the criteria. So I have less symptoms of it, but the overarching kind of grandiosity, which seems to define everything, because, you know, could I be histrionic without grandiosity? I genuinely don't know. But what I've learned so far in my journey is fascinating, and it does feel good. It's a revelation. I've not entirely processed all my feelings towards it, but I will get there. My first memory is getting into trouble at nursery. I was waiting in the hall with a boy called Michael Graham. I must have been 4 or 5 at this time. No, 3 or 4. That primary school starts at 5. I know that I have a primary 1. So I was sitting out in the corridor with this boy named Michael Graham, who had asked my mum if he could marry me, literally. That was my first fiance, if that counts. 3 legitimate adult ones. Oops. Never married though. Okay. So yes. So my first memory is getting into trouble at nursery. I just found it funny. I always found getting into trouble funny. It wasn't scary. I don't know why. And my granddad took us home, and me and Michael. He was my boyfriend, and I was going to love him forever. But he broke my mirror, the mirror they had in my bedroom for when I stayed there. It was a full-length mirror. I grieved that mirror. I remember grieving that mirror. And I dumped Michael immediately. I never wanted to speak to him again. And I never did. My personality disorder, wherever it came from, is very evident in my very first memory. It's insane to be, you know, at this place in your awareness. You're getting more confidence, but you're learning so much, and you're getting even more questions than answers, but some amazing answers, which with grandiose narcissism feel like revelation, and actually kind of which are only just bigging up grandiose narcissism. So wow, yes, it is indeed a mind fuck. So there's my first memory. My granddad was my favourite person in the world. Whenever I would get into trouble, he'd generally applaud me. he was trying to raise me to be an improved version of himself. He had the delusions of a narcissist. He also had the vulnerability. Well, I suppose maybe it was his form of love, whether for me or himself, I don't know, to try and make me grandiose, I guess. It's crazy to think this. He was my closest family member growing up. It was something I never noticed. My mum and my gran always had, narcissism has long been suspected, and the personality disorder has long been suspected for me. Since my earliest memory, in fact. It's funny because it's true. Almost every photo I have of me as a kid is with my grandfather. I thought he was the world's best grandfather. But the ways in which he spoiled me and the lessons he taught me, he would spoil me by taking me out in nature, teaching me to sword fight, trying to empower me. He got me into art. He was an artist himself. He was shaping my reality and I didn't know it. He was teaching me to be like him. He adored me and always told me so. He would cheer me on at sports day when I would win all the races, and I would be an awful winner and he'd be an awful winner too, and we'd just be having fun. Well, my gran and my mum were always trying to tell me to be humble, and he was telling me to celebrate the victories and deplore weakness. And he was my idol. How do you even go about handling that? Okay, I guess that's just something I will have to work out, because I still don't know how I feel about it. But one thing is quite clear: my madness was either passed to me genetically, and he brought out the qualities by spoiling me, by teaching me to be resilient. He was a feminist to the core, He admired Margaret Thatcher type of feminist. He was a narcissist and voted Tory. And yet still, you could not have convinced me he ever did anything wrong. You couldn't convince him I ever did anything wrong. I always thought he was my biggest supporter. Those were my memories through childhood. Working through it in therapy, no, yeah. I don't know if my grandiosity, my lack of guilt, shame, remorse should be seen as a blessing or a curse. I'm just choosing to gravitate towards neutral, but on the positive side, because I have to live in this existence. And it has made me strong, and it has given me a beautiful worldview. And I'm mentally very fucked up, and apparently was created in the image of a narcissist, hence I became a narcissist. He was horribly cruel to my sister. He encouraged me to be cruel to my sister because, you know, I think, you know, by the time my sister came along, I was 9. So, you know, in my teens, I think my mum was so determined to ensure my sister didn't turn out anything like me, and kept her away from my grandfather. And my grandfather was mean to her, as he had been to my mum growing up, because she was the second born child. Nature, nurture, nature, nurture. It's a family thing, clearly. You know, it's insane. Or is it a gift? Is it a tragedy? I think it's however I choose to live it, to live my experience. And because my condition is grandiose in nature, my HPD and my NPD, the way they cross over and the way I experience the world, I actually do have a positive quality of life. It has made me strong. So I have this great gratitude, and, you know, apparently, you know, I was made to be this way. And it's made me so strong, and that must have been his expression of love, but it could have been love for himself. It, you know, or love for me. But there is also that clinical reality that, even though it was done in, you know, what you should think of as positive ways, like building resilience and confidence, was it too much for a child? I mean, I am clinically insane. You know, it can be in a positive way. But my brain, like some part of my brain, okay, not a neurosurgeon or psychiatrist, but basically personality disorder is a pathological neurodivergence, because there's parts of your brain that are wrong, either through trauma or through overindulgence. From a young age, I was taught not to have weakness. I was taught that I was beautiful and brave and courageous and strong, and I was encouraged to do art and sports. I was the only girl on the basketball team. Granddad would always encourage you to be strong, to be rebellious. I had fucking conduct disorder. You know, I always thought he was the most supportive person for my mental health as a teenager. I didn't know I had a personality disorder. You know, going through anorexia. Because my granddad defended me when my mum was losing her shit and like crying and trying to force me to eat a lot. You know, as some mum does when she sees her daughter trying to kill herself, I suppose, which I didn't get at that time. I just felt like it was an attack. My granddad would take me to the gym. He used to work out at the gym every day. My mom would bring it, because at that time if you were under 16, you needed an adult with you at the gym. So, you know, he was taking me to the gym every day, telling me I looked great and I was getting strong. And he told my mum, when she brought it up in front of him, like, she's anorexic, she's sick, you know, his response was, so what, the results are good. At that time, I don't understand that I was a grandiose narcissist, so that was giving me narcissistic supply. I was being told I'm absolutely right and I'm wonderful and I'm powerful, I can do anything I want. I didn't realise he wasn't being the good guy in that scenario, and I still have eating disorder things to this day, but so did he because of his narcissism. So I suppose he passed that one on, but he viewed that as a strength too, which is a fucked up way to think. Which now means I've got lots of therapy to do to try and correct my thinking on that, which might never happen. Because the fucked up way my brain works, because that's how he wanted it to work. My granddad also had the vulnerable side of narcissism. He lived with a lot of regret. I think he had been broken away. I suppose his narcissistic wound, now I think when he would talk about it, you know, he'd lived through World War II. He'd been too young to serve. His study was littered with World War II books and paraphernalia. He always regretted that, you know, he didn't fight in that war. He was too young. But he would talk about his time in the Navy 2 years later. You know, he went over to Hiroshima 2 years after the blast. He enjoyed his travel. He wasn't traumatized by what he saw, which yeah, that requires some lack of a Jiminy Cricket. But he wasn't traumatized, but he did learn something about himself, and he found a bit of humanity that I suppose he perceived as weakness. You know, when he would talk about, you know, his time in the Navy, having been so desperate to serve, there was suddenly one night that there was actually shooting, and it was some kind of misunderstanding, you know, but he said he'd been terrified in that moment, you know. I think that was the biggest wound he'd had to his ego. You know, he had some bad traits I picked up, you know, temper, drama. He was always telling me stories. He was encouraging my imagination. He was an artist. He was obsessed with Amazons. You know, he would tell me stories of classical mythology. You know, there was so much bonding, and it was him trying to make me strong, to make me resilient, to make me what he couldn't be, because that's a legacy that he wanted to leave. It's grandiose and crazy and created crazy. Oh, go figure. How much of our minds are our own? Right. Personality disorders there now. Does it matter how it was made? Right, I've got that. It feels like I've got some answers. I'm still going there. Can I ever work out how I feel about that? Because I was conditioned before my earliest memory to be this way. You know, whether he did it out of love or whether it was a positive or a negative thing, it has made me stronger, it has made me happier. I have an amazing quality of life. It's a great gift. It comes with a lot of struggle too, though. I don't think I would want to pass this on to my son. I'd want to try very hard not to. You know, yes, there is fun bits and there is bits that are mentally healthy. But I mean, but the things that you lack, empathy, guilt, remorse, shame, not being able to understand so much of human emotion, you know, having intensity of emotions, the amount of ridiculous shit you get yourself into. As funny as it is, how many times could you have fucking died? You know, how many bad times have there been? You know, you wouldn't want to give someone this struggle. I suppose you'd want to give them the strength parts and the happy parts. But when you remove at Jiminy Cricket, you remove an important part of the natural, normal human brain. Ergo, it becomes neurodivergent. You can never return to neurotypical, so we just have to learn how to exist and find a more healthy way to do it. And that comes from acknowledging core truths about ourselves, going back, working out everything and trying to work out our emotions. You know, I'm really grateful for the support I'm getting, and I suppose I'm grateful for the gifts from my grandfather. But I don't know how I feel about them coming from, you know, intent. You know, you're a fucking grandiose narcissist. You've had delusions of grandeur since you were a child. They were encouraged. By his creative imagination. Told so many magical, mystical stories. And our stories to this day, it's probably part of the reason I'm fucking histrionic. You know, I always taught to have fun, and you know, a lot of it's so positive. And I am glad I'm the way I am, and that I've got my awareness now, and I'm learning, and the world's opening up in a beautiful way. And it's a way that you also keep realizing how much more and more and more different you are. Usually in positive ways. I do personally, I'm glad I do not have guilt, shame, remorse, or Jiminy Cricket. They seem really awful. They do. The amount that people are tortured by them, I am glad I don't have those. But there is a recognition that a lot of the human experiences I should be able to have, I have never and will never be able to experience, and there are ways I will never be able to relate to neurotypicals. I already knew I was crazy. I always knew I was crazy, not quite as crazy as this. I don't think I want to. I was always eccentric. I've always been me, and I've been crazy. I've been destructive. But I've also been resilient and happy and strong. And that comes from me too. Well, my disorders, but I'm a grandiose narcissist, and I might say me too. And it's a beautiful thing, and it should be a sad thing, but something I can't feel sad about. Should I shouldn't I feel rage towards him? I fundamentally need control. But that fundamental need for control was drilled into me. I don't know if maybe, he'd spotted the traits and decided to guide me in the right path to his mind, to grandiosity, to create a happiest existence. My goal, I've got no obstruction to ego. That's where my grandiosity goes. I want to live life to the fullest. That's how I have histrionic personality disorder, I'm not, I'm hedonistic, and I'm seeking experience and beauty and life and drama and happiness overall. Those are my priorities on the grandiose side, which come from the HPD. The best of both crazy worlds. I think that is what a neurotypical would expect, but I don't. It is making me very aware of a part of me that is just deficient. Like, I literally I'm sitting here, from like discussing it with the psychiatrist the other week. I genuinely don't know how I feel about it. When I try to think, I just remember him as this great guy. I can remember and see the bad parts, but I don't have normal moral judgments. So I can understand him, but not his motivations. Actually, it feels like a giddiness, and I'm trying to think, but it's not coming. I think, your mind wants to go to delusions of grandeur. Like, who would I have been without this? It's irrelevant. It's irrelevant because I will never know. So there, that self-defense mechanism is just shutting that down, I guess. So thanks for listening to, I suppose, my story of how I became crazy. And I hope, this can help someone else too.